Alien girl asked the human for a place to rest. Her simple thank you turned into something deeper. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm rolled across Frontier, 6 like a sheet of cold metal being dragged over the outpost roof, each gust shaking loose dry dust that clung to the air recyclers. Inside the dim repair bay, Ethan Cole stood alone with the hum of aging engines, their amber indicator lights flickering against his worn jacket. He wiped a line of grease off his wrist, listening to the steady ping of cooling metal behind him. Nights out here usually felt empty, predictable, a rhythm he had learned to live inside. Until the soft knock echoed through the pressure door. It wasn't loud. Just 3 gentle taps, spaced far enough apart to make him wonder if he imagined them. Ethan set down his wrench, the tool clinking lightly against the steel floor, and walked toward the airlock console. The storm outside scattered static across the sensors, but a faint silhouette stood at the threshold, small, still, waiting. He hesitated for half a breath before cycling the lock. Dust swirled in as the door opened, revealing a slender figure wrapped in a travel cloak washed pale by the desert wind. The hood shifted, and blue-tinted skin caught the overhead light, soft and almost luminescent. Large eyes, clear, tired, but steady, lifted to meet his. "I just need a place to rest," she said, her voice barely louder than the hum of the generators. No demand, no urgency, just simple exhaustion threaded through the words. Ethan blinked, surprised that anyone would be wandering the outskirts this late, especially during a storm that could sandblast a hull. He stepped aside without speaking, a quiet gesture that seemed to startle her more than the weather. When she crossed the threshold, she exhaled as though the warmth alone was a kindness. He sealed the door behind her, the storm fading to a muffled roar. The repair bay lights steadied, casting calm amber across her features. She pushed back her hood with a careful motion, revealing short silver-washed hair and travel lines etched by long distance. "Thank you," she murmured. 2 simple words, but something in the way she said them felt weighted, fragile. Ethan reached for a thermal blanket tucked near his workstation and handed it to her without thinking. She accepted it like it was more than fabric, fingers brushing the edge with quiet reverence. She settled near the auxiliary heater, letting the warmth climb slowly through her cloak. For a moment, neither spoke. The machines filled the silence with a soft mechanical heartbeat, steady and grounding. Ethan caught himself studying her posture, the way she sat straight despite her exhaustion, the way her eyes kept drifting to the tools on his bench as if she were memorizing the space. Not fearful, just careful. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Storm should pass in a couple hours," he said. "You can rest here till then." She looked up, and something softened in her expression. "You didn't have to open the door." Ethan shrugged, though he wasn't sure why he had opened it so quickly. Maybe it was the knock. Maybe it was the silence behind it. Maybe it was something else. "Could have been anyone out there," he said simply. Her gaze held his for a long second, steady and searching, as the heater cast slow-moving shadows across the metal floor. Then she spoke again, quiet but warm. "My name is Lyrian." Ethan nodded once. "Ethan." And just like that, in the stillness of a forgotten outpost and the soft hum of aging engines, something small but unmistakable shifted, something neither of them had arrived expecting. The heater's soft glow painted a warm halo around Lyrian as she pulled the blanket a little closer, her fingers curled around the edge as if testing whether the safety it offered was real. Ethan busied himself with a cluttered workbench nearby, pretending to adjust a loose panel on a diagnostic console, though he kept catching his eyes drifting toward her. The storm outside rumbled like distant static, a low rolling sound that reminded him how far Frontier 6 sat from anything resembling comfort. Lyrian watched the metal floor for a quiet moment before speaking, her voice steady but hushed, as if unsure how much space she was allowed to take. "Is it always this isolated out here?" Ethan set down the screwdriver, the tool clicking lightly against the console. "Most days, yes. It is just me and the machines. They complain less than people do." Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile. And yet you opened the door to a stranger. He shrugged with one shoulder. Storm was getting bad. Anyone outside would have needed help. Lyrian seemed to consider that, her eyes tracing the grooves in the floor paneling, the circuitry lines glowing faint amber beneath translucent plating. Where I come from, she said softly. People do not open doors without calculating what they might lose. Ethan nodded. He understood that kind of world more than she realized. Well, he replied gently, maybe you ran into the rare person who does not have much left to lose. She looked up at that, her expression shifting, thoughtful, almost concerned. The heater clicked, cycling to a lower power mode. Lyrian adjusted the blanket again, and Ethan noticed she did it carefully, as if she was used to conserving warmth wherever she traveled. How long have you been on the run? He asked quietly, not pushing, only offering an opening. Lyrian hesitated, then shook her head. Not tonight. I do not want to bring the storm inside with me. Ethan accepted that answer without another word. He crossed the bay to a storage cabinet, retrieving a metal mug and filling it with warm water from a heating coil. Here, he said, holding it out. Not tea, just warmth. She took it with both hands, letting the steam rise toward her face. The way her shoulders unwound told him the simple gesture mattered more than she would ever say. She sipped slowly, eyes drifting across the repair bay. Her gaze paused at an old photo taped to a side panel, the image dimmed from years of heat exposure. Is that you? She asked. Ethan followed her line of sight. A younger version of himself stood beside a small transport ship, grinning with grease-stained gloves and a sunburned nose. Yeah, he said. Back when I thought I would fix everything by flying away from it. Lyrian studied the photo for a long moment. You look lighter there. Not happier, exactly. Just less weighed down. Ethan chuckled softly. Life has a way of putting things on your shoulders. She tilted her head. And yet you still make room. To carry someone else for a night. The words hung between them, warm and gentle. Ethan felt something subtle shift, something small but present, like a quiet alignment neither of them had planned. The storm softened outside, the wind settling into a calmer hum. Lyrian drew in a slow breath. Ethan, she said, her voice calm but sincere. Thank you again. I mean it. He nodded once. You are safe here. Lyrian exhaled, and for the first time since she stepped through the airlock, her posture eased as if she finally believed it. And in the quiet that followed, the outpost felt a little less empty than it had an hour before. The storm had thinned into a soft static whisper against the metal roof by the time Ethan finished shutting down the auxiliary systems for the night. The repair bay lights dimmed to their low-power glow, casting long, gentle bands of gold across the floor. Lyrian held the warm mug between her palms, her posture calmer now, though her eyes continued to drift around the room as if mapping every bolt and panel, memorizing her temporary refuge. Ethan pulled a folded thermal mat from a supply crate, shaking a bit of desert dust off its surface. You can rest here, he said, placing it near the heater where the air was warmest. It is not fancy, but the temperature stays steady. Lyrian lowered the mug and watched him for a moment. Ethan, she said softly, you do not hesitate when someone needs help. It feels unfamiliar. He gave a small laugh. Trust me, it surprises me too sometimes. She tilted her head, considering that. You think you are not that kind of person, but everything you do says otherwise. Ethan pretended to adjust the heater knob to hide the way her words caught him off guard. The heater hummed, cycling a slow wave of warmth across the room. Lyrian knelt on the mat, smoothing the fabric with careful fingers. She had a way of touching things that made them seem more delicate than they were, like she was trying not to disturb the air around them. Is this where you work every night? She asked. Ethan nodded. Most of the time, yes. There is always something breaking out here. Machines do not like being this far from civilization. Lyrian glanced around again, her gaze lingering on a cluster of tools arranged with precise order. It feels peaceful, she said. Lonely in a way, but peaceful. Ethan leaned against the workbench, arms loosely crossed. I guess I made peace with the loneliness. It is easier than trying to fit in places that do not want you. Lyrian looked up at him, and something about her expression gentled. Perhaps the places were wrong, not you. The comment settled between them like a soft weight, grounding but tender. Ethan searched for a response and found none that felt right, so he let silence speak for him. Lyrian laid the blanket across her lap and shifted her position, adjusting to the warmth. "Ethan," she said quietly, "earlier you asked how long I have been on the run. I was not avoiding the question to hide something from you. She paused, her fingers curling slightly into the blanket. "I did not want the kindness you showed to feel like a burden." Ethan straightened. "Kindness does not work like that." She breathed in slowly, meeting his eyes. "On my world, it often does." He shook his head. "Well, not here. Not tonight." A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth, small but genuine. She seemed to hold the moment carefully, as if testing whether it would remain steady if she leaned into it. The storm outside finally softened into near silence, leaving only the hum of the heater and the low ticking of cooling metal. Lyrian settled onto the mat, drawing the blanket around her shoulders. "If you do not mind," she said, her voice growing softer, "will you stay nearby until I fall asleep? It has been a long time since I rested without fear." Ethan hesitated only a heartbeat. Then he pulled a stool closer and sat beside the heater, close enough that the warmth reached them both. "I will be right here," he said. Lyrian exhaled, her eyes drifting closed, the tension in her shoulders finally releasing. And in the quiet of the repair bay, with the machines breathing their slow, steady rhythm, Ethan realized something unexpected. For the first time in a while, he did not feel alone either. Morning settled over Frontier 6 with a pale silver light that seeped through the narrow skylight panels, catching the dust still suspended from the night storm. Ethan woke on the stool he had fallen asleep on, his back stiff, one boot half untied. For a moment, he did not remember why he had stayed in the repair bay instead of turning into his quarters. Then he saw her. Lyrian was still asleep on the thermal mat, the blanket pulled up to her shoulders, her breathing steady and soft. The heater cast a gentle glow across her blue skin, giving her the look of someone finally allowed to rest after crossing a long distance. Ethan stood quietly, careful not to disturb the calm that had settled around her. He moved to the workbench and activated a small diagnostic screen, pretending to check system data while his mind stayed with the presence sleeping a few feet away. A soft chime rolled through the bay as the power grid shifted to daytime mode. Lyrian stirred, her fingers curling into the blanket before her eyes opened. She blinked once, adjusting to the light. "You stayed," she said, her voice still touched with sleep. "You asked me to," Ethan replied gently. "I meant it," she murmured. She sat up slowly, brushing back a strand of silver-washed hair that had slipped across her cheek. "It is strange," she added quietly, "to wake without feeling like I must run immediately." Ethan leaned against the counter, arms loosely crossed. "You have time here," he said. "Storm passed. Grid is stable. No one is looking for you at this moment." Lyrian held his gaze for a heartbeat, something unreadable flickering in her expression. "Your world is quieter than mine," she said. "Even the silence here feels honest." Ethan looked around the repair bay, taking in the scuffed floors, the aging consoles, the half-repaired power coupler sitting open on the bench. "Honest is one word for it," he said. "Empty is another." Lyrian considered that, then shook her head lightly. "Not empty," she said. "Not last night. Not this morning." Her tone was simple, not dramatic, yet it rested under Ethan's ribs in a way he did not expect. He cleared his throat and reached for a canteen of water. "You should drink," he said, handing it to her. She accepted it, fingers brushing his briefly. Her touch was cool but steady, grounding. "Ethan," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" He nodded. "Ask. Why do you live out here alone?" The question did not pry. It simply sat there, waiting. Ethan drew a slow breath. "Because. Sometimes distance is easier than disappointment," he answered. "Machines break. You fix them. People break, and sometimes you cannot." Lyrian absorbed his words without judgment. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but you fixed something in me last night. Something very small, but very real." Ethan felt the air shift between them, not dramatic, not loud, but meaningful. He looked at her, really looked, and saw not just exhaustion but a resilience that had carried her farther than she wanted to admit. "You did that yourself," he replied. "I just opened a door." Lyrian smiled faintly, a soft upward curve that warmed the chill morning air. "Then maybe that is what I needed," she whispered. "Someone to open a door without asking why." She stood slowly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders as she approached the workbench. "May I stay a little longer?" Ethan met her eyes, and the answer came without hesitation. Yes, he said. As long as you need. For a moment, neither spoke. The outpost hummed gently around them, the world outside brightening by degrees. And in that quiet, something unspoken but unmistakably deeper began to take shape, like warmth rising through cold metal. Ibrahim's sun rose higher over Frontier 6, filling the repair bay with a soft gold haze that drifted across the floor like a slow-moving tide. Ethan powered up the main console, its holographic display flickering awake with diagnostic readings scrolling in steady lines. Lyrian stood nearby, the blanket still around her shoulders, her eyes following the floating symbols with quiet curiosity. Your machines speak in patterns, she said gently. Almost like a language. Ethan smiled beneath his breath. A language I understand most days. She stepped closer, her gaze drifting from the console to the open engine housing at his side. May I watch you work? Ethan blinked, surprised by the request. You want to watch me fix an old power coupler? Yes, she replied simply. There is calm in the way you do things. He handed her a pair of lightweight gloves so she could rest her hands on the cool metal without discomfort. The moment she slipped them on, the atmosphere shifted. Not dramatic, not heavy, just a soft alignment, like the room itself exhaled. Ethan knelt beside the engine casing, checking the alignment of two magnetic coils. This outpost survives because these systems hold together, he said. When they fail, everything stops. Lyrian lowered herself beside him, tucking the blanket around her legs. It reminds me of home, she murmured. Not the machines. The feeling that something fragile holds everything up. And if one thing breaks, everything changes. Ethan paused, hearing more in her words than she openly stated. That is why you left, is it not? She traced a fingertip lightly across a clean section of the engine casing. Yes, and no. She hesitated before continuing. Sometimes leaving is the only way to protect what remains. Ethan nodded, not pushing further. Instead, he returned his focus to the coupler, guiding her through the process. See this indicator? When it glows blue, the current flows smoothly. If it turns amber, the alignment is off. Give it a gentle push here. Lyrian followed his instruction with care, her movements steady and deliberate. The indicator shifted from flickering amber to a solid blue. Her eyes lifted with a small spark of delight. I did that. You did, Ethan said with a quiet grin. She watched the soft blue glow for a moment, then whispered, It feels good to help something work again. Ethan felt something soften inside him at the sincerity in her voice. You are doing more than you know. She looked up at him, her expression calm but open. So are you. A gentle silence settled between them, not awkward but peaceful, the kind that only forms when two people understand they are safe in one another's presence. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing dust against the walls like fingertips tapping a quiet rhythm. Lyrian glanced toward the sound. The world here seems empty from the outside, she said softly. But inside this place, there is something warm. Ethan swallowed once, feeling the truth of it settle in his chest. That makes two of us, he said. Lyrian's eyes lingered on him, thoughtful and steady, as if seeing something she had not allowed herself to look at before. Then she smiled, small and warm. Ethan, thank you. For the place to rest. And for this. He did not ask what this meant. He simply let the moment stand, quiet and real, held together by the soft hum of a repaired machine and something deeper taking shape in the space between them. The afternoon light softened as it moved across the repair bay, settling into warm stripes that stretched over the floor, and climbed the walls like quiet reminders that time was passing more gently than usual. Ethan adjusted a calibration dial on the console, the faint hum rising as the system responded. Lyrian stood beside him, her hands folded lightly in front of her, her gaze following every motion with an attentiveness that felt more personal than technical. You make difficult things look simple, she said softly. Ethan chuckled under his breath. Only because I have spent years fixing the same problems over and over. Repetition does not always bring understanding, Lyrian replied. Sometimes it only brings routine. Ethan paused at that, hearing something deeper beneath her words. He turned slightly toward her. Is that how it was for you? Routine without meaning. She did not answer at first. Her eyes drifted upward toward the skylight, where thin streaks of light filtered through the dust. On my world, she said finally, everything is expected to follow a precise path. Duty. obligation, presentation. There is little room for who someone actually is. Ethan listened quietly as she continued. When I tried to step off that path, even slightly, it made others uncomfortable. And eventually, it became unsafe. Ethan felt a slow tightening in his chest, not anger, but a quiet ache on her behalf. Lyrian, he said gently, you do not owe anyone the version of yourself they prefer. She looked at him with a soft, searching expression. But you have only known me for one night and one morning. How can you be so certain? Ethan tapped the console once, letting the diagnostic light sweep across her features. Because even in that short time, you have been honest, and strong, and thoughtful. If that is not who you truly are, then I cannot imagine who else you would be trying to become. Lyrian's breath caught slightly, not in fear, but in something like surprise. She lowered her head for a moment, letting his words settle. Back home, no one ever spoke to me like that. Ethan gave a small smile. Then they should have. A silence fell between them, but it was a warm, steady silence filled with an understanding neither of them pushed away. Lyrian stepped closer to the console, her fingers hovering above the glowing display. Ethan, she said softly, can I ask one more question? Anything, he replied. Why did you help me with no explanation? No hesitation. Ethan looked at her fully now, the light catching the faint silver in her hair. Because you knocked, he said simply. Because you were tired. Because you asked for rest. She held his gaze, her expression shifting in a way he did not entirely understand, but felt deeply. On my world, she whispered. That would never have been enough. Here, Ethan said, it is. Lyrian exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing again. She rested her palm lightly on the edge of the console, her posture softer than he had seen before. Ethan, she murmured, whatever comes next, I am glad I ended up at your door. Outside, the wind brushed gently against the outpost walls, carrying with it a quiet calm. Inside, something unspoken but unmistakably real settled between them, like a truth that had been waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. Ibrahim's sun had begun its slow descent, turning the sky outside Frontier 6 into muted shades of copper and faded violet. Inside the repair bay, the air felt different, as if the walls themselves were listening. Ethan finished securing the recalibrated console panel, while Lyrian stood near the heater, her hands wrapped loosely around the warm canteen he had given her earlier. She looked calmer, steadier, but there was a new tension behind her eyes, something she had been holding back. Ethan sensed it the way one sensed a faint change in engine pitch. You have been quiet, he said gently. Lyrian nodded once, drawing a breath that seemed heavier than it should have been. Ethan, there is something I need to tell you. I did not lie to you last night, but I did not tell the full truth. He turned toward her, giving her space to speak without pressure. She stepped closer to the center of the room, the soft light catching the faint silver patterns that shimmered naturally along her skin. The ones I fear, she said quietly, they are not simply people who disagreed with me. They are officials of my world's council. When I left, they marked me as missing, not wanted. They believe I am a risk. Ethan absorbed her words with steady calm. He did not move toward her, but the space between them tightened with awareness. A risk to what? She hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the canteen. A risk to tradition, she said finally. A risk to the order that has shaped my people for generations. If you question the foundation, even softly, they believe you threaten the structure. Ethan felt a quiet ache in his chest. So you ran because staying was not safe. She nodded. Yes. And when I left the settlement on the ridge 2 days ago, I thought no one had followed. She glanced toward the skylight, her voice thinning. But I felt something last night. A pulse in the air. A signal. Very faint, but real. Ethan kept his voice steady. Are you saying someone might know you came this way? Lyrian lowered her gaze, her expression soft but troubled. Possibly. My people use tracking bursts that ride on atmospheric currents. If one reached the storm, it could have carried farther than intended. Ethan considered this, the weight of her worry settling into the quiet of the room. If someone finds this outpost, what then? He asked. Lyrian looked up at him, and for the first time since she arrived, her confidence wavered visibly. I do not want trouble to reach you. You did nothing but open a door. Ethan stepped closer, just enough for his presence to reassure without crowding her. Lyrian, he said softly, I am not afraid of people asking questions. I am only concerned about what you need. Her breath trembled slightly at his words, though her voice remained steady. I needed a place to rest, and you gave me that. But now, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Now I need to know if I should leave before I bring danger to your home. Ethan shook his head gently. Frontier 6 is not much of a home, but it is not a place you need to run from. A quiet stillness settled over her expression, something warm flickering behind her eyes. You speak as though I matter, she whispered. You do, he answered, without hesitation. Lyrian's lips parted just slightly, her breath catching as though the simplest truth had struck the deepest part of her. The outpost hummed around them, steady and grounding. Ethan, she said softly, I have not belonged anywhere in a very long time. He held her gaze with calm certainty. Then stay a little longer, he said. At least until we know what we are dealing with. And in that moment, something shifted again between them, not dramatic, not loud, but unmistakably real, like two quiet forces aligning in a world that had not expected them to find one another. Ibrahim's sun had nearly touched the horizon when the outpost lights shifted into evening mode, their soft amber glow settling over the repair bay like a calm breath. Ethan ran a final systems check on the perimeter sensors, watching the screen pulse in slow, steady intervals. Everything looked normal, yet an uneasy thread pulled at the back of his mind. Lyrian stood near the workbench, her hands lightly grazing the edge as though grounding herself. The faint patterns on her skin shimmered in the dim light, reflecting colors the human eye was not entirely meant to name. She watched Ethan, her expression steady but thoughtful. You are checking for tracking pulses, she said quietly. Ethan nodded. If your people are searching, their signals may show up as interference spikes. Even tiny ones. Lyrian stepped closer, her presence warm in the cool air of the bay. You did not ask whether helping me is worth the risk. Ethan kept his eyes on the monitor for a moment longer, then looked at her. I do not measure people in risks. Her gaze softened, the weight of his words settling into her posture. That is unusual, she murmured, and unexpectedly kind. Before Ethan could reply, a faint flicker crossed the console display. A blip, small but distinct, pulsed on the lower left quadrant. Ethan tapped the screen, magnifying the signal. Lyrian leaned in, her breath catching gently. That frequency, she whispered. It is from my people. But it is not a search grid. It is a locator ping. A personal one. Ethan frowned. Personal? Someone who knows you. Lyrian hesitated. Yes. Someone who was meant to guide the council, not chase runaways. She stepped back slightly, her features shifting with a quiet realization. They are not trying to force me home. They are trying to confirm I am alive. Ethan studied her expression, noticing not fear, but a subtle shift. Relief mixed with something almost like sorrow. Does that change what you want to do? He asked gently. Lyrian looked toward the skylight where early stars had begun to appear. It means I left more quietly than I thought. It means not everyone agreed with how the council handled my situation. But, her voice lowered. It also means someone may come here. Someone who knew me before I left. Ethan waited, sensing the next words mattered. Lyrian drew a slow breath. Ethan, there is something you should know. I was not just questioning tradition. I was next in line to join the council. My voice would have shaped laws, expectations, lives. But I did not fit the mold they required. I was too curious, too open, too willing to see value beyond our own people. Ethan's expression remained steady, but the truth struck deeper than he expected. So you were meant to lead, he said quietly. Yes, she replied. But not in the way they wanted. I felt like a symbol they needed to hold, not a person they wanted to understand. She looked directly at him now, her eyes a deep shade of blue that seemed to hold the glow of distant stars. And then you opened a door to me without asking for anything. That does not happen in my world. Ethan's voice dropped to a softer register. Maybe it should. Lyrian stepped closer, close enough that the warmth between them felt intentional, not accidental. If the person who sent that locator comes, she said, they may want me to return. They may say it is safe now. Ethan nodded slowly. And do you want to? Lyrian did not look away. I do not know yet, she confessed. All I know is that leaving your door behind feels harder than I expected. The console hummed softly between them, its glow reflecting in both of their eyes. Outside, the desert wind shifted directions, brushing against the walls like a gentle reminder that not all signals were warnings. Some were invitations, quiet, steady, and unexpected. Ibrahim's sun had fully surrendered to the horizon when the locator ping faded from the console, leaving only the soft hum of the outpost to fill the space between Ethan and Lyrian. Evening shadows settled across the repair bay in long, gentle patterns, stretching over metal surfaces warmed by the day and now cooling into quiet stillness. Lyrian stood near the skylight, her eyes lifted toward the first true stars pushing through the deepening dusk. The silver-blue shimmer along her skin glowed faintly in the dim light, as if responding to something only she could feel. "If they come," she said, her voice calm but threaded with something fragile, "they will expect an answer. They will expect me to choose." Ethan stepped closer, though not so close as to press her. "And what do you want to choose?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she let the silence settle into the air, like the first breath before a truth finally finds enough room to be spoken. "Before I arrived here," she said softly, "I believed freedom was distance, running far enough, hiding long enough." Her gaze drifted toward him. "Then I came to your door, and you did not demand my purpose. You did not question my worth. You simply made space for me." Ethan felt something shift, quiet but sure. "Sometimes people do not need answers," he said gently. "Sometimes they just need somewhere to breathe." Lyrian turned fully toward him now. The faint glow of the outpost lights reflected in her eyes, giving them a soft depth that drew him into their quiet gravity. "You gave me that," she whispered. "You gave me room to be a person, not a role." The console emitted one last soft beep as the locator pulse completed its cycle and vanished from the grid entirely. Lyrian glanced at it, then back at Ethan. If they truly wanted to force me home, the signal would have been stronger. This one was an invitation. A gentle one. Ethan nodded. "Then the choice is yours, not theirs." She stepped toward him, slow and deliberate, stopping just a breath away. For a moment, they simply stood there, two silhouettes reflected in the soft glow of the bay's lights, the space between them warm enough to quiet every noise outside. "Ethan," she said, her voice a quiet echo of something deeper. "If I stay, it is not because I am hiding. I know. It is not because I am afraid. I know," he said again, softer this time. She drew in a breath, steady and sure. "It is because when I stood at your door, exhausted and uncertain, you looked at me as though I was not a burden." Her expression gentled. "No one has done that for me in a very long time." Ethan felt the truth of her words settle deep within him, solid and real. "You were never a burden," he murmured. "Not for one moment." Lyrian's shoulders eased, the last of the tension dissolving as if the outpost itself had finally given her permission to rest. She looked at him with a quiet sincerity that felt like the closing of a long, weary journey. "Then I would like to stay," she whispered. "At least for now, in this small place that feels larger than everything I left behind." Ethan gave a slow nod, the kind that carried more meaning than words ever could. Outside, the desert wind softened into a gentle sway, brushing against the outpost walls as though acknowledging her choice. Inside, neither of them moved for a long moment. They did not need to. In the quiet, in the warmth, in the soft glow of machinery humming through the night, Lyrian let the last of the fear leave her chest. And Ethan realized that opening the door had not just given her a place to rest. It had brought something back to him too. Something steady, something human, something deeper than either of them had expected.